All right, all right. So welcome to another session of MSMB Hosts. And basically this is an opportunity for us to kind of gather, learn a little bit about some different styles of martial arts, to kind of become engaged with the teachers. It's really also a practice of question asking. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Njoli Brown, and I am the lead instructor and director for MSMB Martial Science Maktabukalis. And we're based out in New York, but we have study groups in Seattle and Beacon, New York, and Hawaii. So we're doing some things. We're making some moves. Today, I wanted to spend a little bit more focus on a segment of our practice called Black Box. So we have a few different things that we teach. We're doing Silat, we're doing Capoeira Angola, we're doing Pikiti Shakali. And so all of those things, I'm very invested not only in teaching martial arts, but also in being really engaged in the culture of those martial arts and all of the things that kind of surround them. So that means also understanding the places, understanding the language, understanding the history. And that requires a lot of deep delving. So it requires getting really invested in each martial art individually and really trying to understand where it's coming from, what its intentions were, how its existence affected the people from whom it came. And so there's a lot to that. There's also the element of it is a martial art. It's a martial arts school that we're running, our martial arts program. And each of these things individually is a martial art in and of itself. And so we always want to remember its martial aspect and practice it in a way that really is kind of application oriented. And so from that, I started developing this thing called Black Box. And Black Box was really my way to, in addition to a very kind of traditional understanding of the arts that we were practicing, and in addition to kind of putting our full intellect and our full body and our full kind of sentiment on one particular martial art, was also for us to have a forum or a laboratory for us to take all the things that we were learning from each of these different styles that we really kind of deeply invested in, and in a sense, over time, figure out what is our personal style. Now, that requires a lot of practice. It requires a lot of getting the vocabulary, developing the skill set, and then being able to put the pieces together, right? So if I'm, an engineer or I'm a mechanic, I need all the pieces individually to be working before I can put them together and get like a strong working motor. If I'm a chemist, I need all of those chemicals in pure order before I combine them and create something that's really worthwhile. So there's that investment too. And that's part of Black Box, is like a lot of conditioning, a lot of fitness, a lot of just fundamentals. But then the projection or the orientation or the goal of that is towards really a sparring oriented scenario, that once we get all of these these tools in the toolbox, to focus it towards a lot of sparring in a lot of different mediums, and that for each person, they're really like using the skills that they're developing to kind of create a style of their own. And so Black Box can be kind of a forum for that. So one of the things that we've been focused on a lot lately is striking, empty hand striking. And I take a lot of that format from my experience in boxing. Now, I wouldn't say I'm a boxer. I'm not like out there making the rounds. It's not like my sole investment, but I do invest time in boxing. I go and train, I go and spar. So I try and use those tools and figure out how to bridge those tools from boxing in. The other thing is that, I do Silat, and I did jujitsu, like Japanese jujitsu, which also were striking oriented as well. So I pull tools from those things in also. But again, like I said, with Black Box, it is not a forum where I'm like teaching people boxing. or I'm teaching people CLAP. We have classes for that specifically. Black box is for us to like look at the tools that we gain from there, from learning and understanding those mechanics, and then figure out how we can apply them across the board. So what I'm going to do is do a couple of instances of things that we get from boxing, some of the striking patterns that we've been working on, like really fundamental stuff. And then I'll talk a little bit about how then we use that bridging over into karambit, bridging over into single stick, maybe even a little bit into single knife, just a kind of short thing. And then across the board, remember as well that this MSMB hosts is really oriented towards question asking. What we're trying to do for students, both in our own program and, you know, as a culture, like what we're trying to, I don't know, grow and propagate, is the idea that the best learning comes from the best questions and that you should ask as many as possible. So, you know, the demonstration part of this will be fairly short. But then I'll come back, and any questions that anybody has, welcome to throw them out there, and I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Yeah, and then it can be about this, it can be about whatever kind of things. The other thing I'm going to put across the bottom is I'll put a link to our Patreon page, just so you know. There are a lot of teachers who are putting in the work to kind of continue to provide forums for people to be training, especially during this time where people are quarantined, people are spending a lot of time at home, people are doing that. And it's a lot of times out of the graciousness of their own heart, out of the goodness of their own heart. Teachers are just doing free classes, they're doing stuff online and everything else. I try to remind folks that teachers are working as well, you know, artists are working as well. And so that if in some small way you can support them, you know, through whatever means they happen to voice or they publicize, go ahead and support in some small ways. Our Patreon page has elements from capoeira, so you can take some classes on there. It has PTK stuff, so it has full curriculum stuff for Pikiti Shakali, and also just has some video content. So there's ways for anyone to engage, even if you're not really into martial arts, but you just want to be supporting, you know, hardworking teachers and artists out in the world. So that's a forum for that as well. But that being said, let's move around a little bit. Like I said, I'm going to go through a few different striking combinations that we do. We'll go through some fundamental mechanics, and then we'll go through a couple of striking combinations, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it bridges into stick and maybe karambit as well. Cool? All right. All right, so to start everybody out, basically what I like to do is go from just some mechanics of 8 fundamental strikes, and then later on we would build out into like 16. We do about 7 or so fundamental striking patterns, and then from those we have a wide variety of applications. So we're going to start out with some mechanics, and then we'll move into some combinations, and then we'll kind of bridge across from there. So for the mechanics, and you'll see, I fight a lot of times southpaw. That was already my tendency before, was to fight southpaw. But I find that it actually has a really nice direct correlation and bridgeway into when we start applying it to weapon practice. Because a lot of times we're in long range, weapon side forward, which is often with our right foot in the front. So you'll see that happen. I'm going to fight from this southpaw position, but if you want to be in an orthodox position with your left foot forward, that's absolutely fine. And we're going to start from a standard guard, and we're just going to throw some jabs. We're going to throw some pivot jabs, right? There are a variety of different kinds of jabs, right? I can step forward and keep my feet flat on the floor. I can use it stepping back. I can not pivot and just throw it kind of flat, right? But I'm just going to throw some pivot jabs. I'm going to always be mindful that my other hand is up in my guard position, and that my legs are in dynamic, they're in a dynamic way, right? Let's go from doing those pivot jabs to just going straight into a jab cross, right? One of the biggest practices, keep doing it, keep going. One of the biggest things I have to like really remind folks of a lot is about their guard hand. For guys who don't come from a striking reference, they are practicing striking sometimes in a format that doesn't really recognize the importance of defense. And so, I have to put a lot of time into working on pivoting back and forth into a hand that's in your guard. All right, so let's throw our hooks. So we have jab, crosses, right? Where we're going with full extension right now because we really want to exaggerate not only the strikes, but the pivoting of the body and the pivoting of the feet, right? We're doing that, and now we're going to add in those hooks, right? And we're going to use that same dynamic. Now with the hooks that we're going to apply, particularly because a lot of the fighting we do in sparring is close quarter, we're going to stick to what I call a fighter's hook. So a boxer's hook would be like what you see from Muhammad Ali, where he leans the head back and throws that hook really wide. Or sometimes you see guys step through and throw that hook out there. A fighter's hook comes in tight. It's a Mike Tyson hook. So you've gained the position by getting into close quarter. You just turn this so that everything is framed up 90 degrees from the floor, guarding across the face, right? And it pops straight out of the guard, right? And then that same thing is going to happen on that rear hand hook or that rear leg hook, right? Is going to come where it comes straight out of the guard. It comes up flat, so you got 90 degrees. You have this across in front of the face, and if I need to change height, I'm going to do that by changing height with my body, okay? So let's just go back and forth and go through all four of those. So we got jab, cross, a hook, right? Feel free to use that and move around a little bit as well, right? Moving side to side, moving forward and back, right? I can do my jab, cross, and then I can pivot on that hook as well, right? So you can work on pivoting. If you already have some experience, you can double up. But always we want to work on snapping back to that guard, throwing them, and working our punches and our strikes on a pulley system, where that hand comes out, the other hand comes back, boom, and they're working in rotation with each other. All right, so we got two hooks. So now what we want to do is we want to work on our jab, our cross, our hook, and then we're going to do this uppercut, and then we're going to do a rear leg uppercut as well. And so in the same way, because we're orienting or preparing ourselves for a lot of close quarter fighting, we're going to keep it tight. We're going to use a lot of that power generation from the legs, right, by bending the legs and coming up. And we're also going to strike that uppercut straight up the line in kind of a pillar position so that not only does it come up, but it also protects the face, right? So I'm going to have my front leg come up. It's not going to come up super high. Right now, we're not talking about elbows. So we're just going up for that strike where we chamber it and bring it up. We chamber it and bring it up. And we bring it up so that we're both guarding and protecting the head. Okay, so you have this, right? We chamber, we roll the shoulders, we bend the legs to get a lot of energy and power in there. And now we throw all 6 of those together, right? Do it slow if you need to. Boom, 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 right? So you got all 6 of those. You can do those same things I said before where you can move forward on some. You can pivot, right? You can work all of those different things. So we're just working on the mechanics of striking, and you'd be surprised at how many people in your Kali studio, capoeira studio, anything that is not oriented towards that, really just need to spend a whole bunch of time just working on the mechanics of striking. Just need to work on that, you know? All right, so for our last two in that 8 series, we already had our jab cross, we had our hook, our uppercut, right? Now we're gonna slightly step out to the side. So if you're southpaw like me, I'm gonna slide slightly over to the right. If you're in your orthodox, you'll slide slightly over to your left, right? But I'm gonna slide slightly out to my right, and I'm gonna do what we call a shovel hook. I know it has a lot of different terminology, but we're gonna call it a shovel hook. And we're gonna throw that shovel hook from here, boom. It's gonna come at a 45-degree angle. So instead of that 90-degree or that lateral angle from the first hook, or that direct perpendicular line from the uppercut, it's gonna cut that 45-degree angle. And then we're gonna throw our overhand, which is gonna come down on the complementary 45, right? So I'm gonna go boom, boom. And one of the most important things I say about throwing this overhand, there are a variety of ways you can do it. Some people do it super wide. You know, if you look at the old like Chuck Liddell videos, I mean, he's throwing that thing like this. I'm throwing it a bit tighter, and I'm also really trying to focus on guys getting quick back to the guard again, right? So they do it, they stir that soup, so they don't have to come back along this same line to get back to the guard, but they throw it and then pull it right back in. All right, so you have your shovel hook and your overhand, right? Right, off here. Okay, so now we have the mechanics. We're going to go through all of them again a couple of times. And I want to put that last thing, which you heard there, which is breathing. So people feel shy about breathing, or nervous, or awkward, or whatever else. However you need to do it, you need to do an audible breath so that you remind yourself to be breathing so you don't get clipped and then get the wind knocked out of you. And then it doesn't really matter what you've learned because you can't breathe anymore, right? So on every strike, you're going to do an audible breath, and you'll just do all 8 of them, right? So you'll do like, ha, 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 right? Whatever that audible breath is, whatever that sound is that comes out, that's fine, but it needs to be a strong, audible breath. Right? You're gonna like make them super tight. You're gonna really like use those mechanics of the body. You're gonna stay relaxed and loose, but you're gonna keep those muscles plyometric and really like utilize your body every time. Like utilize the muscles and the springiness of your body every time you strike. All right, so go through a few more of those. Let me just double check to make sure there's no questions or commentary before I move us forward. All right, cool. So we're good. All right. All right, so let's look at just a couple of combinations, right? We're not doing a whole bunch. We obviously, when I do a black box class, I mean, sometimes we will spend the whole of that time just working on mechanics, right? We're just working on mechanics and doing conditioning and then working on those mechanics, working on our body motion, right? Our defensive positioning, how to move around, and how to just throw strikes. Let's do a couple of kind of fundamental combinations. And I do like 7 because they're just baseline. They're ones that every boxer knows in the world. I'll explain a little bit about how some of the orientation is a little different, but as far as the combination, is because they're high percentage combinations, so they are very often successful, or they have high success rates, you know? So our first one is just gonna be that double jab and cross, right? So we're pumping up. I might use that double jab to move in and gain range. I might use that double jab because as I'm retreating or as I'm moving back, I want to make sure that person knows he doesn't get anything without giving, He doesn't get to move in without taking something, okay? So we're throwing that double jab and the cross. Boom, 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 boom. And that's how you see sometimes that jab as a pivot, but sometimes that's not what we're using it for. So sometimes that's not relevant, you know? I keep them nice and centered, straight down the line. And if I'm doing it most effectively, my strikes should also be covering my face, right? I'm not throwing jabs and crosses out here. I'm throwing them straight down the pipe because I'm covering my own line at the same time as I'm striking there, okay? Right, so I'm developing that mechanic. Okay? Now, next one is probably the most common, or the one that you would learn even if you don't know anything about striking, and someone's probably teaching you a combination of punches, which is a jab, cross, hook, right? They're happening sequentially. So for me, southpaw, it's gonna be like right, left, right. And I'm just gonna go, ha, 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 ha. 1, 2, 3, and snap right back in and keep the body moving, right? So even after I finish striking, my body is still moving. I'm changing position. I'm working on moving side to side. I'm pivoting. And then I'm throwing my combinations in between, right? Right, so I'm always moving and I'm working on those things need to be part of each other. And then I can move back and forth between those two combinations, right? So I have 1, 2, 3, and then I can move around 3, right? Jab, jab, cross, move a little bit. Jab, cross, hook. Or I could put them into a 6 series, right? So I'm like jab, jab, cross, hook, and move around. So I have a lot of ways that I can play with even just a small number of tools. I can expand them out and do a lot with them, right? Okay, so this was just giving us a little intro into kind of like the starting line for a lot of the black box stuff. We spent a whole bunch of time wrestling. That was my experience all through high school and college, and it's a lot of where my reference for grappling comes from. So we spend time wrestling. We spend time in some of this boxing-oriented striking, some kicks from silat, from capoeira. We do a lot of takedowns. All of those things are part of it. And then obviously we bridge all of that stuff into how does that look with our weapon systems. So again, I talked about the fact that I keep this right foot forward because a lot of times when I'm sparring, I have my weapon side forward, right? And so in this southpaw position is an easy translation to that. I said before that even though we're doing some of these elements from boxing, I'm not calling it boxing. I'm not saying I'm a boxing teacher by any means. I'm just using tools from boxing in this regard. So for example, whereas boxing, that setup happens here, for me, in truth, I'm probably striking across this line because if I'm using my Kali footwork, right, my reverse triangle, and I move out, then that's where I'm striking actually. So, right, I might pivot out, but I'm moving out to here. And then same thing over here, right? So I'm here. I'm moving out along that reverse triangle, and I'm here in this kind of side orientation or this outside line orientation, throwing that same thing. So here with the stick, when I strike that number 1, say that number 1, and I step forward for the breakout, boom, here I am, and I can use the same kind of like muscles and mechanics that I've been developing through striking to take take advantage of that position, right? I can strike, I can uppercut while I have this in full wall, right? I can do my overhand here and hit that with the puño or with the fist because I'm wearing gloves a lot of times when I'm sparring at least, right? I can do it on the inside line and I'm working on that same mechanic I had from that shovel hook, right? On that same mechanic I had from the overhand, right? So I can forward wall and do my shovel hook and my overhand, right? So it's useful across the board to work on that kind of power generation. I've also been spending time developing a lot of stuff around karambit. And this is nice because since I'm not beholden to any particular system when I do the black box, I can take the benefit of a whole bunch of things and utilize them when I transition weapon platforms. So for example, I'll show a lot of things where I do like a double jab here with the karambit. One is to kind of counter their bicep and then operate around it. So my first is a straight punch, which I might see a little bit more, or at least from my reference, came from silat, right? Where my hand is oriented this way. And then my second punch was from my jab from boxing, where I get a little bit more extension and more power, right, as their hand retracts. And then I'm hooking, which is something that I take from Kali. And now I'm inside. I'm using this hand to bisect, and I'm really kind of trapping the other bicep using what Duhan Jared talks about as the zero pressure principle, right? So I'm like trapping that out here, and I'm moving forward, and then I'm still using elements for power generation from close range fighting that I get a lot of from boxing, right? I don't do a lot of flipping and flailing with my karambit, so I use it in the orientations that I use from striking. I use it for trapping, right? And cutting, and with nice, tight, power-generated motions. So, you know, that kind of thing transitions through a lot of stuff and makes it really available for you when you need it. When you get in those positions, you want to know you have all the tools. Okay? So yeah, that is my short demonstration or insight into the black box program that we're doing with MSMB. So remember, like I said, we're doing a full track of capoeira, which means like with capoeira Angola, everyone learns Portuguese, everyone learns how to sing, everyone learns how to play all instruments in the bateria, everyone learns history in Brazil, in the African diaspora, and they learn the movement of capoeira. Then we're doing Pikiti Tirsha, and everyone is learning all of these elements of Pikiti Tirsha. So we're invested in learning both Tri-V and Doce Methodos, right? To learn those in kind of a parallel track. But we're also really into learning language, and we're very invested in learning history, being involved in cultural activities. You know, we partner up with Pikiti Tirsha ELITE. So in this whole collective, like we're very invested in that as part of our journey in Pikiti Tirsha. And then Sila doing Semangat Baru. And so this has its own like distinct path and journey and history, and we really are oriented in that. And then black box is for us to play. You know, it's for us to play and create, and for us to recognize like we're individual people who maybe have individual ways that we may experience all of these martial arts and determine how to use them, and to also have different references. So some people are in, for me, I live in New York, like you need to know how to throw hands. Like empty hands is going to be a big part of our practice because that's something we see a lot. Empty hands and probably knife. You know, like those are things that are going to be a big part of what we do. You may be in another place where it is a common thing for dudes to roll around with machete, or where you live in a state where everybody is open carry with their firearm. You need to have a lot of different references that are really distinctly relevant to you. Cool. So I don't see any questions here right now. If I see any in the next moment or two, I will do my best to answer them. Cool. And otherwise, what I will say is check out that link that I have below, which is our Patreon link. And that is your opportunity to see more of what we do, read some articles, see some videos, do some training. I do at least 2 or 3 live video sessions per month to accompany all that stuff on Patreon, so people get a chance to not only train stuff from video, but ask me questions. So I do that as well. And it would be great to have any of you guys on board. And thanks for everybody who came out. All right. So thank you very much.